Hi, IBD. I'm Meredith Heyman. This is IBD Explains. Thanks so much for joining me. Well, earnings season could soon be very different. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is considering moving earnings reports from a quarterly to a semiannual schedule. This comes following President Trump's call to make the change. So, what would semiannual reporting mean for publicly traded companies? And what do investors need to know? Joining me to break it all down is IBD News Editor Ed Carson. Ed, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks, Meredith.
So, why has President Trump called for a semi-annual earnings report schedule instead of the what we've had the quarterly filings?
Well, the idea is that a lot of supporters of this idea is that it can make that executives right now may make short-term decisions because you got to make the numbers every quarter rather than like, well, let's really focus on something long-term decision making and like how the thing's going over time rather than trying to do everything in this 3 months. Because I know that just covering earnings season, it always seems that earnings season is always here. And so that's the benefit. It might reduce some costs, as well, because there's the filing costs and there's timing, not just the cost, the official cost, but like, yeah, all that time just got to prepare for the call every time. You got to, well, there's a lot of work on that. And so, and such that might encourage more companies to go public because it's not so onerous. And to be fair, a lot of countries around the world, a lot of places, they only require twice a year of reporting. This is not without precedent.
So, if this schedule rule is changed, is there a timeline for when we would see it take effect?
No, it's not clear. We don't have a formal proposal. President Trump talked about it fairly recently, and then the SEC chairman said, "Yeah, we're going to take a look at this proposal." He had proposed something like this in the first term, but it seems more momentum this time. It might be several months before you get a formal proposal out there, and then it might be several months before a vote is taken, and then it might be longer after that. So, one can imagine that at least not until the 2027, and maybe even beyond that before you phase something in. Again, if they want to rush it, they can go faster. But it's not imminent how things would be happening.
So, this is not a change we're going to see happening anytime soon. And even if and when we do publicly traded companies even have to shift their reporting schedules?
No, not really. I mean, there's the SEC filings. There's a lot of details that they probably wouldn't be doing, and is a lot of interesting things in those quarterly numbers. But the stuff that we get out, those releases, a lot of them would probably report every quarter. In fact, a lot of the international companies will do that, even on where they don't have to, especially if they're listed here because they do have to. I think that there'd be a clamor, I mean, for that. And with Regulation FD, fair disclosure, we don't have that much insight with a lot of companies. So if it's every 6 months, you can just imagine the earnings gaps and downs, how the stocks might react. So I think there'd be a lot of pressure on companies either to formally do it or at least give some, major headlines. This is how our earnings have been. So there's not much transparency for investors going into it. Boy, you don't know, is this stock going to go up 30% or down 30%, every 6 months?
So, some mixed opinions potentially on this decision. We talked a little bit about the pros of shifting from a quarterly to a semi-annual reporting schedule. More on the cons now of this change. You've been talking about transparency for investors.
Yeah, the transparency, because you want to know how are things going. You don't want to wait 5 months, all that stuff, and instead of 6 months instead of three to find out that something's going wrong or that something's going right. I mean, it's just sort of those trends are really important. What if the company is doing shenanigans? And that can just take even longer. What's the upside? If companies still report every 3 months, either formally with some earnings reports or with informal, hey, this is how things are going, pre-announcements, then there may not be the benefits. If there still need to beat the so-called quarterly numbers, then the upside isn't really there from doing this while still having some downsides.
So, what would the implications be for the market if we saw a schedule change like this?
Well, again, it depends on how much companies would really do that. But if you say started having companies that just don't give much guidance over 6 months, earnings season could be these huge gyrations where all of a sudden, whoa, things are much worse or much better, or these mixed pictures. So I think it would be just that much more gyrations in that regard. Because ultimately, if it doesn't have a huge effect, profits will still be what they are. And ultimately, at the end of the year, things may look similar. But I could imagine that earnings season would be a much more volatile situation.
So, how should investors prepare for this possible schedule move?
I don't know if there's much to do right now because right now there isn't going to change at any time soon. I think that if it does happen, and then we have to sort of see how things do develop. Will companies provide that guidance? And will they do it on a schedule? Because we know, Tesla reports on this day, and you know what, weeks in advance usually. But what if they just do give you guidance every 3 months, but you don't know when it is? I mean, there'll be things like that. I mean, so it could be a shock. You just wake up, oh, I didn't know that was coming. Oh, the stock is up 10%. Oh no, it's down 15%. How it plays out, how will it really play out in the real world? In the short run, I don't think anybody has to do anything. I think we'll get some feedback even as gets approved. Companies might say, we're going to keep doing this, or they say, no, we're going to go every 6 months. Investors will have, a sort of an understanding as that comes into force. But we'll just have to see how that goes if it happens at all.
All right, Ed. Well, we'll be watching. We'll see what happens. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Meredith Heyman. This is IBD Explained. Stay right here on IBD for more. We'll see you next time.